Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf in 2024. Yes, Happy New Year, everybody. And thank you so much for all your best wishes for Christmas and New Year. So, Happy New Year to us all. Hopefully, it's going to be a good year. But before we start the year properly, there are two videos still related to 2023. And the first one is today, the tops and flops of 2023. I have 5 tops and 2 flops. Yes, I really did my best not to have too many. And Sunday I will film, as always, the best dudes. So the best books by male authors that I read in 2023. As you know, if you follow my channel, I normally only talk about books by female authors, but I still read male authors, and once a year I make a video about the best dudes, not the worst dudes, because I think that would be unfair given the fact that I read fewer male authors. Anyway, sorry about that. That was a text message from 2 friends of mine who started the new year with COVID. So I have to do some groceries for them. Anyway, not important. So I have 5 books, like I said, 2 non-fiction and 3 fiction books, and then 2 flops, 1 fiction and 1 non-fiction book. So, okay, let's start with the good news, the tops. And I'm not going to do the normal categories, book I thought about the most. I'm just going to tell you the 3 fiction books that, for me, were the best books, which does not necessarily mean the best literary quality, but the books that spoke to me the most, the books that I will remember. And the first one, I don't think there's any surprise, by the way, because I raved about these books quite a bit. The first one was Woman Eating by Claire Coda, a book published in the beginning of the year, I think. 2022. The author is from the UK, and she is an artist, English writer and musician. And this book is about a female vampire. But no, don't stop listening. I don't like vampire books at all. It's not my thing. But Coda used the theme of the hungry woman in order to write a really interesting story about the art world, and the woman, the main character, lives in works in a gallery. What's her name? I forgot her name. Lydia. I'm so bad with remembering names. But anyway, Lydia works in a gallery. So there is sexism, misogyny. Those are the topics. And the author uses the vampire thing as a vehicle to give Lydia certain possibilities. That's all I'm going to say. I thought it was a really interesting and fresh take on Me Too, sexism, sexual violence towards women, but also about, women and food, because we tend to diet and we tend to, all that shit. So there were various aspects that I thought were really interesting in this book. So yeah, definitely one that will stick with me. And I read it at the beginning of last year, so I think in February something. The next book on my top list, top 3 fiction books, is also no surprise. Perini Schroff, Bandit Queens. And this one was nominated for the Women's Prize. I think it was on the long list, but didn't make the short list. And it's a debut. And I wanted to look up when it was published. I think last year, as Yes, last year, 2023. And the other one, by the way, the Coda, was also a debut. So sometimes I'm really dazzled by new writers. This one is set in India, in a small city. The author is from Texas, or at least she has an MFA from the University of Texas. But the book is set in India, and there is, yeah, I don't remember the name of the town, of course. And our main character is Geeta, Jetta, a young woman whose husband is gone. And everybody assumes in the village, everybody assumes she killed him because he was not a good guy at all. And because everybody assumes she killed him, women are turning to her for advice how to get rid of their horrible husband, their abusive husbands. And then the story takes off from there. There are a couple of twists and turns that you might or maybe not expect, that drive the story forward. And another message, but it's just saying okay, so I'm not going to stop the video again. I'm sorry about that. It's like nobody is messaging me ever when I'm just sitting on the couch, but when I'm filming, of course, people are messaging me. Anyway, so it's again a similar theme as the vampire book, Woman Eating, because it explores sexism in a setting of a village in India, contemporary setting, and the twist of this woman being thought of somebody being able to get rid of the abusive husband. So that is the vantage point into a quite familiar story. But because the vantage point is different, it drives the story in an unusual way. And it's also, I have to say, at times, hilariously funny. So I loved it, Bandit Queens. And the last one was also a Women's Prize book, and it was shortlisted, as you can see on the sticker that I tried to remove, and you can remove it. But underneath is a sticker that is printed on the cover, which says longlisted. Anyway, some things never change, not even in 2024. Anyway, the third book is Lalene Paul Pod, about a pod of whales. And this book was published 2 years ago, 2022. I really like Lalene Paul's speculative fiction writing when she has an animal setting. I loved her book, The Bees, that was set in a beehive and from the perspective of a worker bee, but exploring, using this society, this bee society, using it for showing human topics, like working and hierarchies and societal climbers and things like that. And a similar thing is what she does here with whales. It's dolphins and whales, I think, mainly, but there are also fish. So it's mammals, water mammals, or however you call that scientifically, mammals who live in the water, but also fish. And our main character is called Ia. EA is how it's written. So I pronounce it Ia. And she is kind of an outsider in her family, in her pod, because she lacks the ability, certain singing ability. Can I say that? Yeah. Suffering from a type of deafness. She cannot master the rituals that unite her pod of spinner dolphins. So she is an outsider, and that the premise is that this difficult position makes her leave her pod. And then it's basically a road movie, a road trip book in the water. She encounters other pods, other dolphins. She encounters whales, but she also encounters fish. And it is a book about us humans destroying the habitat of fish and mammals, water mammals, ocean mammals, by noise, by pollution, plastic, But it also explores, or the story is about the psychological effects that these environmental changes have on the animals. And it's quite gruesome at times, brutal, because there is quite some violence and abuse amongst the animal, the pods, the dolphins, the dolphin families. But I thought it was so imaginative, inventive, and it was a really, really good story. And I'm not saying she understands dolphins better than anyone. That's not the point. Don't get me wrong. That's like the bee book. It was not trying to mainly teach us scientifically something about the animal, even though she did her research for sure. But it's a human story in the end. And I loved it. I really loved it. Then the two nonfiction books that I thought were different from other books that I read and really stuck with me. And it was even more difficult, I have to say, with the nonfiction. I read 50 or 60 nonfiction books last year, and most of them were really, really good. You see one here, Viral Justice, which was an excellent, excellent book. So it was quite difficult for me. Why not pick this one? And in the end, I thought books that really opened up a world to me that I was completely unfamiliar with. And the first one was a pick of the Book Naturalist Book Club, run by Heidi of My Reading Life and Doris, all the books. And it goes on this year. So if you haven't checked out the Book Naturalist Book Club, please do. And their pick, I can't remember the month, but one, I think it was in the fall, was Candice Millard, River of the Gods. And the book was published fairly recently. Yes, 2022. And it is about genius, courage, and betrayal in the search for the source of the Nile. So it's for millennia, the location of the Nile River's headwater, so the source, was shrouded in mystery. In the 19th century, two explorers, Richard Burton and John Herring Speaky, I don't know how you pronounce his name. Should have looked that up, were sent to claim the prize for Britain. So it's about these men together with their indigenous guide looking for the source of the Nile. And the book, first of all, this obsession with things, Egyptian stuff, and then the source of the Nile from the colonial masters is something that is kind of weird in a way, at least from a 21st century perspective. But the book is, of course, then also about this colonial idea that, like the cover said, Britain can claim the prize as if it's their country. It's, so the book really gives you an adventure story, because it is fascinating how they look for this, for the source of the Nile, but it also gives you a portrayal of this century where we as Westerners, as white Westerners, exploit, whole continents, like the continent of Africa, and just feel that we are entitled to the land, the resources, the people, but also the nature. So yeah, it's a book with so many layers and aspects to it, and it's extremely well told. So I love this one as one of my best nonfiction reads. And the other one is for me more familiar topic, in the sense that it is a book about sexism, as many of them are. That's obviously something that appeals to me when that subject is tackled. Maybe because I'm a woman. Could be. Anyway, but the book gave such a, for me, unfamiliar setting and topic, and that is Kate Zernike's The Exceptions. Nancy Hopkins and the Fight for Women in Science. Nancy Hopkins is a scientist, or she's retired now, still alive, but retired at MIT. So it's starts in 1963, when there are very few females in science, and she was 19 at the time and wanted to become a scientist. And some people, like Nobel Prize winner James Watson, thought women can't be really good scientists. And then it goes all the way up to almost a turn of the century, the millennium, into the 21st century. So in 1999, Nancy Hopkins is now a geneticist and cancer researcher at MIT. But racism as well, but she's white, so sexism is persistent. And it's fascinating. I mean, not in a good way, but fascinating how in the details it makes it really almost impossible for women to succeed as scientists up to the year 2000. Yeah. And it's not a bitter story. Nancy Hopkins is not coming across as a bitter woman, but still as a woman who fights for her rights to be a scientist. Absolutely riveting and fascinating. So those are the tops. And now I have 2 flops. Also, it was not that easy because I did have a good reading year. My average score, according to Goodreads, was 3.5, and I did not have many books that I thought were really horrible. But I picked 2 because they were maybe not even the worst books that I read, but somehow they irked me a lot. And the first one is the nonfiction book, a tiny little book, A Horse at Night on Writing by Amina Kane, published, published 2022. So they are all fairly recent. Oh, by the way, I never include classics in my tops and flops, because that's unfair, kind of, I think. Anyway, so this is a book about Amina Kane, who is a writer about writing. And it was not bad, but it was banal. It was superficial. And worst of all, it was pretentious. It's like the most superficial kind of statements. Oh, I read this book. Why is this so good? She never answers that question. It's amazing, the imagery. It's like one critic says, yeah, it's like an extensive Goodreads review, like what I would write on Goodreads. This book was good. I don't really know why, but it was good. And the same on her writing. There is no depth. At least for me, there was absolutely no depth in any of what she wrote about her reading and writing. It was a real disappointment. And yeah, banality. Really pity, because I was looking forward to that book. And then the worst fiction. And it was without any doubt for me in terms of what irked me the most, Sheena Patel's I'm a Fan. I didn't buy the book. I had it from script. So here's the cover. Also longlisted for the Women's Prize. And a lot of people loved it. It's a debut novel. And it is about this woman obsessed with the guy who is married and the woman he is married to or who he has the relationship to. So it's this obsession, and it's, banal, and worst of all, really, really boring, I felt. There was nothing new or fresh to a topic that is, to say the least, well known. And if you want to give a modern take on it, it's not enough that the obsession partly includes emails. It's the modern way of communication is fine, but that's not enough to give a modern take on a subject that has been talked about, 100 million times. And especially if the whole dynamics is really, really old fashioned. So the woman is younger and she's obsessed with this guy, and he's the sexist asshole who doesn't take her seriously, but she's obsessed anyway. And it could have been set in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. So there is nothing new at all. I mean, read Janet Winterson, Written on the Body, or read Annie Arnaud, Simple Passion. I admit those were books from the 1990s, but they had a fresh take on this subject. And if you don't have anything new to say, just don't write the book. That's my advice. But that comes too late. Anyway, these are my tops and flops of the year 2023. And next up will be the best dudes. And then we will only talk about books that I read in 2024. Thank you very much for watching 21 minutes. Oh, my dear God. I hope you're all doing well. Please leave me a comment if you're so inclined, and I'll talk to you all soon in the next one.